In late October of 2006, I moved to Portlock, Alaska. It's a place that doesn't technically exist anymore, but you can still find it on certain old maps and on the lips of people who've lived on the Kenai Peninsula long enough to know you should untalk about it. Portlock was abandoned decades ago. Officially, the herring industry collapsed in the 1950s, and the economy went with it. But unofficially, people said other things, disappearances things in the woods, a presence that didn't live when the people did. I didn't believe any of that when I first arrived. I was 32, recently divorced, and trying to outrun a quiet kind of grief that follows you everywhere. I was a freelance environmental journalist, writing about abandoned towns and ecological collapse. So when I pitched a story about documenting life in a ghost town as nature reclaims it, my editor loved the idea. But when I told him I wanted to stay on site for several months, he hesitated before agreeing. That should have been my first warning. A small charter boat dropped me and my supplies off in a gray morning. The sea was choppy and metallic under a low sky. The captain, a man named Eli, who looked like he'd been carved from driftwood, helped me unload in silence. I asked him how long he'd be willing to wait in case I decided to leave early. He didn't answer right away. "I'll come back November 15th, he said finally. "If you're here, you're here." "And if I'm not?" I asked. He looked at the tree line behind the crumbling dock, where the forest pressed in, dense and dark, even in daylight. "Then I'll assume you left another way." Before I could ask what he meant, he was back in his boat and gone. Portlock was quiet in a way that felt deliberate. The wind moved through the trees but never seemed to reach the center of town. The rotting cabins, the collapsed cannery, the schoolhouse with no roof, they were all arranged along the inlet like a half-forgotten memory. Moss and lichen coated everything. The windows stared out blankly. I remember thinking it didn't feel abandoned, it felt paused. I set up my shelter inside what was once the general store. The roof was mostly intact, and the walls were solid. I had a generator, food for 2 months, recording equipment, and a satellite phone that occasionally worked. The first week was uneventful. I explored, took photos, recorded ambient sounds, and wrote notes. At night, I read by lantern light. The silence was intense, but not unpleasant. I slept deeply. The second week, I started hearing footsteps. The first time, it was late in the evening. I was transcribing notes when I heard slow, deliberate steps outside. Heavy boots on wet ground. I froze. "Hello," I called out, feeling foolish. The footsteps stopped. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The clearing was empty. No footprints despite the damp soil. I told myself it was a bear, or just my imagination. But it kept happening. Not every night, but just often enough that I couldn't dismiss it. Sometimes it sounded like someone walking around the building. Other times, it was closer, right outside the wall, behind my sleeping bag. Once, I was sure I heard breathing. I started keeping my recorder running at night. When I listened back, the tapes were mostly silent, just wind, distant birds. But on one recording, around 2:17 a.m., there was a faint sound that made my stomach drop. 3 distinct footsteps, a pause, then something like fabric brushing against wood. I tried calling Eli to ask if anyone else ever came out here. He didn't answer. A few days later, while exploring the old schoolhouse, I found something that changed everything. The building was just a frame. The roof collapsed, desks scattered and broken. On one wall, partially protected from the elements, were words carved deeply into the wood. "He is still here." Below it, in a different hand, another line. "We did not leave." I photographed it, my hands shaking. That night, I dreamed of children sitting at their desks, all facing that wall, too terrified to look away. By early November, the days were growing shorter, the cold sharper. I started feeling like I was being watched during my walks. Not a dramatic feeling, just a constant, low-level awareness of eyes on the back of my neck. I stopped venturing far from the town center. Then I found the journal. It was inside a cabin near the tree line, tucked under a loose floorboard, wrapped in oilcloth. It belonged to a man named Theodore Collins, and was dated between 1947 and 1949. At first, the entries were mundane. Weather, students, supply shortages. But then the tone shifted. March 3rd, 1948. Children say they hear him at night. Primera told them, it's only the forest settling. I hear it to Juni 17, 1948, another dog one. No tracks, no blood, just the sound. November 2nd, 1948. We are being watched. I am certain now. When I walk to the shoreline, I feel it behind me. Always behind. The final entries were frantic. February 11th, 1949. We tried to leave today. Boat would not start. Weather turned in minutes. He does not want us to go. February 14th, 1949. Martha is missing. Found her coat by the trees. No footprints leading away. February 18th, 1949. If anyone finds this, know that we did not abandon this place. We were hunted. The last page was torn out. That night, the footsteps returned, louder than ever. They circled the building for hours. I sat awake, back against the wall, gripping a flare gun. At one point, something pressed against the wall, hard enough that the wood creaked inward. I woke just before dawn to my recorder hissing, the tape run out. When I listened to it, I felt physically ill. There was whispering. Not words I could understand, just a low murmur. And underneath it, faint but unmistakable, was the sound of breathing slow, heavy, and close to the microphone. On November 14th, the day before Eli was supposed to return, I decided to leave. I packed what I could carry and headed for the dock at first light. The fog was thick, clinging to everything. Halfway there, I heard my name, spoken calmly, almost kindly, from the trees to my right. I stopped. I know you hear us, the voice said. It sounded human, male, tired. I turned slowly. Who's there? I asked. A long pause, then another voice, female, overlapping the first. You shouldn't have stayed. Shapes moved between the trees. Not fully visible, just impressions of movement without form. We tried to leave, the first voice said. He doesn't like it when people leave. My heart was hammering. Who is he? The forest went silent. Then, very close, right behind my left shoulder, something exhaled. Hot, wet, wrong. I ran. I don't remember reaching the dock, only collapsing onto the boards. The fog began to lift, and with it came the sound of an engine. Eli's boat cut through the water toward me. As we pulled away, I looked back at Portlock. For a moment, I thought I saw people standing on the shoreline. Men, women, children, just watching. Behind them, at the edge of the trees, something much taller stood motionless, its outline barely distinguishable from the forest itself. I never published the article. Eli never charged me for the ride back. Years later, in 2019, I read about a group of hikers who went missing near the old Portlock site. Search teams found their campsite intact, food uneaten, tents zipped closed from the inside. No bodies were ever recovered. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear footsteps outside my apartment. Slow, curious, and just before I fall asleep, I swear I can hear someone whispering, very softly, very patiently, waiting for me to come back.